to be out and have direct conversations, and I did with more than 200 of our customers. And I went to 8 cities in the US, specifically I also had been in Japan. And I think that Mary's story and kind of her vision that she's really working on a vision for the future of General Motors, that this is like, not just, in the areas that you're talking about, whether it's electrification or the sharing economy or the autonomous vehicle, but the values that are guiding the organization are shifting as well. And I think Mary's legacy in General Motors will be that she will have taken a set of values, and maybe her company will have moved from maybe quality was number one. One of her competitors says quality is job one. Maybe trust is moving to the top of the values hierarchy. And I think that is what's going on for a lot of our customers.
Explain that. I mean, what does that mean for a company like GM to say you're going from quality to trust?
Well, as we move to a more, as we move into a society that's kind of coupled with two things. One, these incredibly broad movements into technology where, we all know that technology is getting a lot smarter and more connected. But we also know that we're moving into this world of inequality as well. That's globalization's child, and I think that's kind of where you were going with your comments. Both of these things kind of have put the world into a trust crisis. And every now and then you step into that trust crisis. Mary knows because her predecessor gave her some gifts, and then she's done a beautiful job coming out of the trust crisis back into trust. And that's her challenge, right? To not only for herself to come into trust, but then to bring her whole organization and everyone up. And then I think that she's such a great example of a leader, which is why we wanted to have her here, what she's doing, building a new trusted General Motors. But the second piece is, and I was just sharing with her backstage that, my wife feels very, connected to General Motors, and she just bought a 71 Blazer. It was a direct reaction to me buying a Tesla X. She took one look at this car and went, I'm not going in that car. It looks like it just came out of Sleeper, with Woody Allen's going to pop out any minute. And she said she thought she had too many neurotic Jews around the house as it was. So she went on eBay and she picked out a really fine 71 Blazer for about $29,000, and she shipped it to herself, and that's her car. She's part of the GM community. She feels very connected to GM. She mostly only buys GM cars. Where she's from in Tacoma, most of her relatives who are in civil service, mostly they're police officers and school teachers, they mostly drive General Motors cars.
Yeah.
And she feels very strongly connected to the brand. And then I think the third thing is everything is getting more intelligent, okay? So we know that is going to be a shift that a lot of us are trying to understand. Maybe we're going back and watching the Terminator movie once or twice, or looking for little clues of what's going to happen. And these autonomous cars are going to be amazing. Hopefully they won't eat us.
That's a big trust.
The world is shifting.
Yeah.
And so those things are on my mind. How do we get more trust? How do we build stronger community? And how do we prepare for intelligence?
Mary, it's really important that there be some people here at Dreamforce who disagree with Mark, but it looks like you agree with what he's saying about the importance of trust.
What we're trying to do when we look at, who General Motors is and why we exist, it's to earn customers for life. And it's not just to sell you a car today, but it's to have that relationship to provide you an outstanding experience. So you trust from a safety perspective, you trust from a quality perspective, you trust from a value perspective. So, it actually lines up really as how we're driving the company.
There was a really important, you became CEO in January 2014, immediately hit with the ignition crisis, which affected, 2.5 million cars. Most observers say you dealt with that in a way that was very atypical of General Motors and of the auto industry. And in fact, you could compare it to how VW has reacted to its crisis. You said, we've got to be transparent about this. We have to make sure the public understands that we're taking it seriously and we're not trying to hide from it. Why did you do that? That wasn't the culture of GM.
Well, I would actually say, though, in the years leading up to 14, actually, with my predecessor, Dan Ackerson, we had been working on what did we want the company to stand for. And it was around the customer, around building strong relationships, and about delivering excellence. And so when the issue occurred, doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is one of the things I talk about within the company. And so we realized we had an issue. I mean, the engineering work that caused this issue was actually done in the late 90s.
Wow.
And so, but it was an issue, and we had to own it. We had to be transparent, and we had to do what's right. I mean, many times I said if I could turn back the clock, I would, but I can't. But so what can I do? And I'm really proud of the company because not only did we talk about learning from it, doing everything in our power to never let it happen again, but just this past year we did a week-long dedication to safety and reminded everybody, it's at our core, and we plan to do that because this was such a important, and tragic event that we need to make sure it never happens again.
You, in the Most Powerful Women edition of Fortune, which I hope everyone will read, I mean, for some reason, Mark has put copies of Forbes all over the convention center. I don't know what's going on.
We can change that, Alan. We can change that. Just a couple small things.
I know what I have
happen.
to do, yeah. But in the Most Powerful Women edition of Fortune, Jennifer Reingold interviewed you, and at the very end she said, what's the one piece of advice you have for other business leaders? And you said, speed, move quickly, recognize that time is not on your side. I thought that was really interesting. What led you to that conclusion?
Well, I think there's been many times in the past where General Motors had the technology, had the idea, but couldn't get out of its own way to put it into the marketplace. And so, and really everything is moving so quickly when you look at how technology affects, and we don't have a right to exist. And so one of the cool things is we bought Cruise Automation, which was a 40-person startup, right here in San Francisco. And we're making sure that it keeps its speed. In fact, as I talk to the two co-founders, I often say, don't let anything, because the 220,000 people of General Motors are here to help, but you don't need that kind of help. And so, and we pick some really high potential people who really value speed and have done innovative things. They're kind of points that can get them anything they need from General Motors, but they're not getting caught up in some of the processes that are necessary to run a company of that size. But what I'm finding is they're driving a lot into the company. So, in the past, if somebody said, I've got to get this task done and it's going to take, this long to put the business proposal together and it's going to take 20 people, and in the time that they put the business proposal together, the Cruise guys are saying, just give me 3 engineers, I'll get it done. And that is kind of permeating through the company in a very positive and powerful way.
That's good. Mark, you've seen this played over in many different companies, and you have to be nice to them all because they're all your clients. But I think the story Mary is telling is the exception, not the rule. The rule tends to be the big lumbering companies, when they have a startup in their midst like that, tend to choke it, tend to smother it. What are the keys to success in a situation like that from your point of view?
Well, we all want to innovate. This is important. All of us want to have innovation as one of our core values in our company. Who doesn't want that? And, one of the challenges is that as, your company goes farther along through history and gets bigger, you always have this kind of, innovation neurosis. Am I innovating enough? Am I going fast enough? Am I going to come up with the new ideas first? And you don't want to be known as the fast follower. You want to be known as the innovator. And you want to be the one who's going to have the new idea and have, I coach a lot of executives on how to maintain that, within themselves. How to maintain that what I call beginner's mind. It's one of the reasons why. And if you haven't done that, we have 40 monastics from Plum Village, France, who teach under the disciplines of Thich Nhat Hanh, literally outside the front doors of Moscone, sitting and meditating and teaching beginner's mind with all of our participants. How many of you have seen or been with any of the monks yet? Anybody? Have they let you out of this room? Okay, a few people.
Did they go to the U2 concert?
They also went to the U2 concert, yeah. Monks like music too, Alan. We all want to be innovative, and we want to get to the future first. That's what we want for our customers. We want our brands to be known as innovative brands, and I think that's what you're articulating. And the problem is sometimes you push that envelope and you'll break something, or something will go awry. And in other cases, you're like, gee, I can't get there organically. I need to become inorganic. That is, I'm going to acquire. I think for all companies today, this is an important balance that if you want to be committed to innovation, you have to be committed to organic innovation and inorganic. It used to be in our industry, a very common phrase was not invented here, NIH. It's kind of disappearing a little bit in the vocabulary of the next generation CIOs and CEOs. They realize that if you're going to innovate, that you need to include others, and those others may be outside of your company's walls.
But you also have to have a culture that will accept that. I mean, you and I have now been in, 3 or 4 of these roundtable conversations with CEOs that are supposed to be about technology and industrial transformation. But what has struck me is that every time, about 15 minutes into the conversation, you realize we're not talking about technology anymore.
You're never really talking about technology. I mean, technology is always just, we're not going to get too far out there on this, but technology and what you're creating in your company is kind of what you're creating in your mind. So the most important thing is to get clear about what your intentions are. What is your vision? What do you really want? And what are your values? What is really important? And the reality is that, like we were just talking about, I went to USC Business School, graduated in 1986, and when I went to business school, the things that we were taught